Okay, what's holding you back from writing a book that supports your career? Strategize with Shine Press to write, publish, and market your book with joy. Illuminating stories, empowering authors. Go to shine-press.com to learn more.
Welcome to Productive Joy with Dr. Christy, where fun meets action.
Hi, friends. Welcome to Productive Joy. You are in for another treat today, and I am so excited to introduce you to my new friend. But before I do, I want to make sure you are following this podcast and that you are getting everything you can out of Productive Joy. So do me a favor, hit that follow button, subscribe, do whatever you need to do, whether it's on YouTube or iHeartRadio or Apple or Spotify, any of them. Because if you don't, you'll miss amazing people like Tina, and I don't want that to be the case. So do me a favor and do just that. That is not an April Fool's joke. That is something super important that you remember. So we do have with us today Tina Miller. I am super excited to introduce you to this brilliant woman who is a mom of an 18-year-old boy. She has 2 fur babies, 2 dogs. She's a speaker. She's an author of 5 books. She is a comedian. She used to be a therapeutic foster care parent, and she does really amazing things for students. So Tina, welcome to Productive Joy.
I appreciate the time and the opportunity.
This is going to be a lot of fun for sure. But people are funny and they really only listen for like 30 seconds and then they go, yes, I want to hear it, or no, I don't. So if you could convince us in like 30 seconds that we should keep listening, what would you say?
Well, for those of you, I hope I don't have Oreos still stuck in my teeth.
You're good. You're good. I don't see any Oreos.
I ate like one, pack before I did this. So, I'm good. But, I just want people to know that, there's hope no matter what the circumstances. And I would love for them to just tune in to hear my story, because that's exactly what my testimony is all about. It's just giving hope to people after, being healed from a lot of stuff.
Gosh. Oh, and I want to hear your story. So let's go all the way back to the beginning. Tell us how you ended up where you are today. You can go as far back as you feel like you need to make that.
Lord. So I was born and raised in Ohio, and I didn't speak until I was 3 years old, and I haven't stopped. But and then between, 3 years old and 6th grade, I actually had to go to speech therapy because I had such a horrible speech impairment. So I got bullied a lot, and I actually was afraid to even open my mouth. And so I found refuge in writing. And so I would go into my closet, which was like the safest place for me in my house at the time, and I would write, and I would write my feelings, and I would write poetry, and it just came very natural for me. And I was a very mischievous child. My mom says I didn't have terrible 2s, I had horrible 9s.
Oh,
So at 9 years old, I started smoking cigarettes, and I was playing football with the boys, and I got hit by an SUV on my bike, and like it was I had, like, I swear, 700 lives as a child. But I had gone through a lot of childhood trauma, and then as a teenager, I was raped and had, survived domestic violence. And so, long story short, by the time I was 18 years old, I was addicted to alcohol and drugs, and I was a daily user. And I barely passed high school. Quick funny thing about high school, I was put in the corner in Spanish 4 class from my teacher for 6 weeks for making people laugh. So he told me, he's like, quit making people laugh. And so he literally sat me in the corner my
oh my
senior year.
gosh.
And then I had an English teacher tell me, don't ever write again. Like, writing is not your thing. And then I had a guidance counselor tell me, don't pursue college. You're just not the type to go to college. And so, against all odds, I went to college, and I actually failed 9 classes because, when you're,
Hard.
drinking and using drugs, like,
Hard. You were doing some other stuff.
yeah, it's like that's not part of the curriculum, right? And I wasn't showing up. And so I actually got sober at 23 years old.
Wow.
And I had a professor that really spoke life into me. It was the darkest part of my addictions, and I really wanted to end my life. And I went to one class after being readmitted under academic probation because I was kicked out. And she asked me, she said, "What's your major?" And I said, "Interior design." And she said, "No, honey, you need to work with children. With all the pain that you've been through in your childhood and adolescence, you can use that for a purpose and you can help people." And it
Mm.
was the first time that an educator took time with me. They believed in me and they gave me hope. So I literally ran from her classroom at the University of Akron to my academic advisor's office, and I changed my major
Mm.
to family and child development. And so I went the route of social work. And I've worked over 26 years in social work, education, and juvenile justice. In the midst of working for the Department of Juvenile Justice, I saw there was a huge gap in services for teenagers struggling with addictions.
Sure.
And so while they're locked up, they would get a little bit of sobriety. As soon as they would go back to the traditional school, they would relapse.
Yeah.
And so I saw this gap. I wrote a white paper, sent it to Tallahassee. It never got looked at. And so I quit it. I quit my full-time job with state government and I started a nonprofit with $0.
Mm.
And so that's how I started Florida Recovery Schools of Tampa Bay. And just from there, I opened my first school April 2021, Victory High School, and then my second school August 2023, and then I just opened a third school in Tampa in October 2024. And what Victory High Schools are is we're nonprofit private schools that help ages 14 to 19-year-olds with substance use disorders or co-occurring disorders. So basically, teenagers like me, teenagers that were told you're a failure, you shouldn't pursue education, you don't have a knack for writing, maybe they don't use their voice because they've been bullied or know. And then also, a lot of my students are very funny. And in traditional schools, they're told to be quiet or sat in the corner like me.
Yeah.
And so, what I teach my students is I have a phenomenal staff,
Mm.
and we really teach our students to discover their gifts.
Yeah.
And those gifts are, God given. And those are the gifts that you present to the world. And we really dive deep in them, understanding that healing and hope are all part of, our curriculum, our daily curriculum. But, that they're not a label, they're not a diagnosis. But the one thing I love the most at Victory High School, what we teach them is that they're compassionate, caring, and lovable.
Mm.
And for me, that was the heart. I'm 50 years old. And I just started to feel like I'm lovable.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something a lot of young people that struggle with addictions, and that's something that they may really struggle with is
Yeah.
accepting, you know what, I am lovable and I'm worthy of an education. I'm worthy of these people that love me back to life. So
Yeah.
yeah, long story short, that's it.
Tina, okay, first of all, you are such a remarkable human. And on behalf of all
Thank you.
educators, I apologize that you had a bunch of jerks who didn't know better than to take care of you, because that to me is not okay. I teach teachers for a living and I would never accept that. So kudos to you for overcoming the ridiculous things that they told you that were just simply not true. And then, I mean, you dropped some bombs in that little explanation there of things that you faced, things that you dealt with, things that you had to overcome. But how beautiful that you are helping other people do exactly the same thing. Because we are all worthy and we do all deserve to be taken care of and loved and shown that we have purpose. So, wow, just well done. Well done.
Thank
And
you.
you're doing this in my backyard, which is just even better.
Yeah.
In the Tampa Bay area also. And I have a lot of directions that I would like to go.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm trying to make a decision as to which one, because you get it. Obviously, you lived it and you had to overcome an awful lot to get to where you are. You mentioned you were the funny one, right? And that the stupid teacher, and we're just going to call it what it is, told you to stop making people laugh. Like, first of all, that's not okay. Secondly, it's been my experience that those who have faced the biggest traumas, my students, I used to teach high school. My students who faced the biggest traumas were the funniest. They were the ones that wanted to bring light and life to others because that was their safe place. Do you find that that is quite common? And how do you help the kids find their gifts? Because you said you get them to the point where they know who they are. What do you do to make that happen?
So first, a question. I know for me, I used humor as a deflection. And so if I could get people to laugh with me, they won't laugh at me. From having, speech impairment and learning disabilities and ADHD, I just had all this energy and my mind was going a million miles per hour all the time. But I'm also creative. And so that comedy, I still do comedy actually. And that comedy, it literally has saved my life. To be able to take, the darkest moments and then, like you said, bring light. So I love when my students, I have one in particular that wants to become a comedian. So I'm going to be coaching him on, the power of the pause, and being able to work with audiences and selecting, things. So those of us that have comedy as a gift, we do. We take the darkest, places of our lives, and then we can actually make light of that. And
Mhm.
we do that for coping mechanisms, of course, but also to make people smile and laugh brings me so much joy.
Mhm.
And, I think that's what's so important is to see, we meet our students exactly where they're at, and they may have a gift. It's like, for example, my first graduate, she was an artist, phenomenal artist. Over the years, she's also in the foster care system and that. Over the years, I have just been there for her. She's since graduated, back in 2022. She calls me Mama T. She had lost her biological mother and doesn't have a mother figure. So I kind of adopted her. She's now 20 years old. But, now she's pursuing psychology and then wants to minor in art therapy.
Mhm.
And I'm like, this is so cool. She just started college last week. And so it's meeting them where they're at, loving them back to life, and then also, encouraging them to discover what it is that they want to do.
Yeah.
So I have some phenomenal students. I mean, I tell all my students, they're brilliant. They are brilliant. You get the substances out of them, and they are brilliant. I'm
Yeah.
telling you, it's mind blowing. And, sometimes it's tapping into, you know what, you're very empathetic and you're very caring
Yeah.
for people. Have you ever thought of maybe pursuing, children, working with children, or we have equine therapy. And it's so funny to see the kid. Oh, I'm scared of horses. I'm scared of animals. And then they get in there, and next thing they're like laying, face to face with these huge horses, or we have a farm we go to has mini horses, and they're loving on these mini horses, and I'm like, "Wait, did you just say you didn't?"
You were afraid
Okay.
of that?
So it's pretty cool to see, that they open their mind. And
Yeah,
this is what I've learned as an educator is that when you create a safe, healing centered environment, you allow them to open their mind.
absolutely.
And, we know that creativity is the opposite of anxiety, and that connection is the opposite of addiction and isolation. And so we just kind of incorporate all of this together. So we do start off every morning with a mental health check in, and we help them regulate their emotions.
Yeah.
One thing I realized when I was using alcohol and drugs was I had 2 emotions. I had angry rage, or I was happy, elated. I was like, I had 2. And then, work in a recovery program and realizing, "Oh, wow, okay, well, I'm kind of feeling a little jealous," or, "Oh, I'm nervous. Oh, yeah, I can feel that. It's in my stomach. I feel a little nervous." And teaching our students that it's a life changer is what it
Yeah.
is.
Well, and let's translate that into all business because sometimes people don't realize the power of great educators, right? And so as leaders, period, these are things that we should be doing for our employees. These are things that we should be doing when we're hiring our employees is making sure one that we're checking in with them mentally and then also giving them the ability to find their gifts and to shine in the way that they're meant to shine. And that is what's most inspiring to me. So, how do you find the right employees? How do you figure, because that is a gift. And I have worked in buildings where some of the teachers could have worked in a school like yours and been amazing, and others under no circumstance should have set foot anywhere near space like that. So
Yeah, I heard that one.
yeah, right. That we all have. So how have you hired so well?
Okay, so this has been very interesting because people on paper look perfect.
Right.
And then
Especially now with AI, like we can look really
oh,
good on paper now.
oh my goodness, they have the, degrees and the letters after their name and, so on and so forth. But when they're actually hired and they're actually in the position and you're like, "Oh, no, this is not gonna work." So here's my process is I have them fill out an application online, and then I do a phone interview with them, but then my third interview is I bring them in and sit down with my students, and my students have questions for them.
But
And we've prepped them beforehand. They've actually wrote the questions, but we prep them on, "Oh, okay, that's not very ethical," or, you can't ask them that, but for the most part, I have one mentor in particular that we call him the interrogator because he, since, 14 years old, he can sit down, he can see people's authenticity, like, he could feel it, he's very intuitive, very observant of details, and I tell you what, I hired him as a mentor because I'm like, "This boy, he's brilliant." Well, he's a
yeah,
man now, but, he's brilliant.
yeah,
So, they sit down with my students, drill them with questions
yeah,
because I'm observing that potentially new employee. I wanna see, like, how are they gonna react to this?
yeah.
How are they, like, first of all, are they gonna be able to build trust with this population? Because it's kinda like a gang initiation. You know?
100%, 100%. It's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, yeah. And so I observe in that, but then afterwards, I speak with the potentially new employee, but then I also speak with my students and staff and find out, like, what do you think? Does this person have potential to be on board? And so it's always very, very interesting to hear what my students, what their perspective is.
Yeah.
And they've been dead on. Oh my goodness. Like they have been dead on. So to answer your question, all of my staff have experience in recovery. It could be their own recovery of addictions or other things. It could be mental health. It could be that they're an ally of recovery. Maybe one of their family members
Yeah,
is, sober and in recovery. So that I first and foremost, that is super important with my population.
yeah.
I have hired people before that had no clue about recovery, and my students,
No, they're
uh,
gonna eat them alive. That's
oh yes, yeah, yeah, because it is true, especially with people in recovery with addictions. Like if you been there, done that, got the T-shirt, pawned that T-shirt, and got another T-shirt, like
right.
that you build that instant street cred,
Yeah.
with those
Well,
with our students.
and what I heard that I think is a big takeaway for our listeners is involve the people who are going to be working with those that you're hiring, right? So your students are your direct customers, so to speak. They're the ones that are going to experience the most out of these educators. And if you didn't involve them in the process, then their chances are it was going to be like that one you hired, right? Like the one that you were like, that wasn't it. That person was not the right person. So I think the lesson though is recognizing that it isn't one person's decision. It really is the team's, and the team needs to come to consensus and put them in the real space, right? Like, because you're right, it
Yes.
can look really good on paper and have
Oh
all
yeah.
the credentials necessary, but it's not, it's more of it's a heart, right? Like it's a,
Yes.
and not just in your space, although especially in your space, but in all spaces. And then they have to be able to bring out the best in others, which I just
Absolutely.
beautiful. So I have to ask my favorite question because darn it if you aren't the picture of productive joy in my opinion.
Oh, thank
But
you.
what would be your definition of productive joy? If you had to describe productive joy to somebody, how would you do it?
Hmm. Productive joy is, in my opinion, it's a daily reprieve. It's a daily condition. It's a daily choice.
Mm.
I don't have bad days anymore. I have bad moments.
Yeah.
And then I turn it around. I think gratitude is a huge component to productive joy. Every day I wake up, I'm a woman of faith, so I thank God that I have another day.
Mhm.
One more day to make a difference, to spread hope, to share my joy with others. And so I think gratitude is a huge component to productive joy. I, I've never heard someone that was in recovery of addiction say, I was just so grateful today, so I relapsed with crack. Like, you don't hear
Right.
that. So
Right.
if you stay in that attitude of gratitude, it's amazing how your life will transform. So I would say I kind of was all over the place, but
No, but no, I love that answer. And so, was it that one professor when you were, in your 20s that said, you're better than this and you should be working with kids that taught you that? Or where did you learn that if you sit in gratitude, it's difficult to have bad days?
yes, I had started a 12-step recovery program in 1997. And I was working those 12 steps because I thought my, alcoholic father when I was a child really screwed my life up. And so I was blaming him. And so I was in a supportive group for family and friends of alcoholics. And I, you're to get a sponsor. And so I chose a sponsor who was the most grateful, peaceful, joyful woman ever. And I
Oh,
was in the most miserable state of my life.
sure.
Oh my goodness. And little did she know I was taking her as a hostage. But she changed my life. She said, if I'm going to sponsor you in this 12-step recovery program, you have to call me every day and tell me 5 things you're grateful for. And I tell you what, I really, to this day, think she kept a list.
Oh,
'Cause
nice.
I would call her and I'd say, "Oh, I don't know. I'm grateful for air today." And she's like, "Oh, you know what? It's September 15th. You said that. So you need to come up with something else." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, lady." So it's almost like she kept a list, and she would keep me accountable. But it made me think of, being grateful. Like I said, when you're in that state of mind and you're looking for things you're grateful for, like I said, just waking up and being able to see, I'm so grateful every day. And so when you're in that state of mind, you can't become a victim.
Ah,
You're either powerful or pitiful, and you can't become a victim. And so when people actually are under the influence or addicted to substances, they're in that victim mentality.
sure.
And so, in order to be powerful, you have to have that gratitude.
Yeah.
And it changes your whole life and it changes those lives around you.
Well, thank God for that sponsor, and I'm grateful that she did keep a list and that she held you accountable for that. I have not suffered with addiction. However, I did have some traumatic moments happen that caused me to look for the good. And so I was 19, my parents divorced, lost our house in bankruptcy, everything with it, and all of a sudden I was on my own, which at 19 you should be, except I was not in any way prepared
Oh,
to be
yeah.
by myself just yet. And so I started a good things journal, and my good things journal had 3 lines per day. And I forced myself to write good things in those 3 lines. And what happened is I couldn't fit all my good things in those 3 lines, even though that was possibly the worst year of my life.
Yeah.
So I hear you and I feel that. And I think, there's a whole lot out there right now about toxic positivity and, oh, you're just over the top. This is genuinely how I choose to see the world. If you don't like it, that's okay. You don't have
Yes.
to be a part of my space, but that's what you're going to get from me consistently. And it sounds like, Tina, that is what people get from you consistently as well. What a gift you are. Oh my goodness.
Oh, thank you. What a
Well,
gift
and
you are.
well, I just say I think you're a beautiful soul inside and out. I am going to take us in a totally different direction for a minute, just because I've not ever had a comedian on my podcast. So, I mean, I understand making people laugh at school, but what made you want to get up in front of people and make roomfuls of people laugh? How did that happen?
So I did have a teacher in high school that really believed in me. She was the speech coach, and I had to take speech class just, as an elective. And she said, you're great at improv. Like in class, I'm making people laugh in that. And she says, have you ever honed in on the different characters that you can create and voices and kind of honed into that as a humorous, motivator or, person that can do like comedy. And I was like, no.
Because I'm
And so
18 and no.
so she actually, recruited me on the speech team, and I went into the onto the speech team in humorous interpretation. And what that looked like is you do a 10-minute setting. And so I did about 12 different characters in that 10 minutes. And speech tournaments consist of you enter a classroom for like a 10 to 20 different competitors that are your age, on their speech teams, and then there's like 2 judges in the back of the room, and while you're doing your humorous interpretation piece for 10 minutes, these competitors are psyching you out. They're
Oh
and they're
my.
acting like they're falling asleep and they're coughing and they're trying to distract you. So I learned the techniques of comedy and all that through her classes, her coaching, and these tournaments.
Wow.
I actually won that tournament. I was a district champion and I went to states then. And I mean, I was like, oh my gosh, I guess I am kind of good at this,
Buddy,
Uh,
Seth.
but I always think about that, like, what that was like a boot camp, for like comedians to go into that room to all these people to psych you out. And then you just keep going and you're in your own little world and you're just trying to, perform. Nobody's laughing, nothing. So now when I do comedy, I always hone in on those people that are laughing, smiling, getting my jokes.
Sure.
Those are the people because a lot of times we're kind of programmed in our head to look at the ones that are, discouraged or not laughing or rolling their eyes. And it's like, I'm so grateful for that speech tournament that taught me, who cares about them?
Right.
Focusing on the ones that are enjoying, your joy and that, your humor and that. And so that's what I've done. And so the first time I was ever offered money to do comedy, I was like, okay, this is mind blowing. Like, oh my, yeah, sign me up. I'd be more than happy to make
Yeah.
people laugh and get paid for it. But I did want to share real quick that when I published my 5th book, I actually mailed it to my English teacher from high school. And I said, this is my 5th book. I remember the words that you said to me in high school. I just want to remind you that words are powerful, but I'm more powerful. And I said it to him. I
None.
never
Good for you. Chances are good. She didn't remember what she'd said to you until you brought it back up, but she needs to know that no,
Yes.
no, ma'am, we are here to build you up. We are,
Don't do
you're, uh,
that.
no.
Yeah. And I just think of how many other students heard, negative
Oh, yeah. It
comments
happens all the
like,
time. Like when I work with educators all over the country and I often will ask, do you remember your favorite teacher? The one that, believed in you? Absolutely. But if I ask, do you remember the one that didn't? Every hand goes up. Yes, it's this person and I had her. I mean, for
yes.
me, it was Mrs. Steele in the 7th grade who told me that my handwriting was not as good as Aaron Young's because all my letters didn't touch the bottom line of the thing. And to this day, I wonder, I mean, well, my handwriting is kind of a disaster most of the time anyway, but I think about Miss Steele and her stupid tight bun that she had in the back of her head. She wrecked me in terms of confidence over something stupid,
Yeah.
right? She didn't have to say that. She could have said, okay, Chrissy, why don't you get your lines to touch? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so yes, I hear you, and I'm so glad that you have created a space where your students are only going to hear, what you can, and
Yes.
believe in you. And no, this might not be your gift, but this is. So let's focus your attention over here. I
Yes.
tell my kids all the time, my own children, they're 23, that actually they will be 20. Yeah, they'll be 24 in 2 days from April 3rd. And I tell them all the time, if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, it will always feel stupid.
Absolutely.
We have to stop doing that.
Yes.
Okay, so wait a minute. Tell our friends that are listening about your books and how they might find them, because clearly you are a fascinating human being who's done something.
So Tina Talks Truth. Tina Talks Truth is my stage name, and that's where in all my social media. And TinaTalksTruth.com is my website, and that's where they can find my books. I also was a past international radio show host, and I had 10 episodes of a TV show called Tina Talks Truth. And so I love, providing hope and healing to people. And, our motto at Victory High School is, if there's breath, there's hope.
Yeah. Ah, well, and wait, we didn't even mention the fact that were you on the Kelly Clarkson show?
Yes.
That's the thing, yeah? How did that happen?
You know what? The producers found my story, which is, it really blows my mind because I created our websites at that time. And they were like, I guess, scouring Google and, going through the internet, and they found my personal story and how I opened these schools. The producers called me and interviewed me, and then they called multiple students of mine and graduates and interviewed them. And that's, yeah, May 2024, I was on the Kelly Clarkson show.
Yeah, you are such a perfect example of what can happen if we don't let life beat us down, right?
Yes.
Because you had every reason to give up multiple times, right? Every reason to say, you know what, this is too hard. I don't feel like doing this anymore. I'm
Yes.
going to succumb to the addiction or to the depression or to the whatever. But you didn't. And you are saving lives left and right
Oh,
here in the
thank
Tampa Bay
you.
area, which is beautiful. And I have a feeling that this isn't going to stop in the Tampa Bay area. This is going to grow. And I am just
Yes.
super, super grateful that you are using your talents the way you are. Well done. I can
Thank
talk to you for
you.
like literally days, but I know people won't listen for that long. And so I have some rapid fire questions. Would you
Okay.
answer them for me?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Okay, first question. What's your definition of fun?
Well, I think letting loose and just, without regret or guilt.
I love that. I like the caveat.
Yes.
Okay. How do you know that you're showing up as your authentic self?
I think when you're just you and just being you, and you don't second guess what comes out of your pie hole. You don't second guess what you're wearing. I went to the doctor's appointment this morning and I wore these pants and they're like a teddy bear. But I realized, oh my gosh, they're pajamas. you know? And the girl's like, I love your pants. And I was like, they're pajamas. I just realized it's like, you know what? I am who I am. And I think that is the most empowering and joyful thing is, I'm 50 years old. I'm not out here trying to impress anyone.
No, and I have to tell a funny story about the pants. So I have a friend who every day at the gym wears black leggings. Period. Thank you very much. Well, her mom bought her some leggings, and they are every color under the rainbow, pinks and purples and blue, like obnoxious pants. And so we've decided that sometimes you just have to wear the pants, right? Like sometimes you just have to put them on and own it. And so that's what you did today is you wore the pants. And I see, and there's so many metaphors in life on just wear the pants.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So wear the pants. And I say comfort over fashion.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, like at this point, right? And it's
Oh, yeah.
outside here in Florida, right?
Exactly.
All right. So how do you channel your best self on your worst days?
Well, I give myself a moment. I give myself about 20 minutes to cry, get it out. Usually it consists of me applying for jobs. I'm like, I'm done. That's and I just kind of I go, I dive deep into the emotions if it's, frustration, anger, whatever. And I just allow myself to feel it.
Hmm.
And then I get through it.
Yeah.
It's just that moment of I'm here, I'm feeling it, but I don't have to stay here. And sometimes I just need to take a nap. You know?
Amen.
There's like that one video going around, that little girl, and she's hangry,
What?
and oh, are you hungry? Yes, that she eats and she's so much better.
Yes.
So sometimes, I use halts, HALTS, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, sick. If I'm any of those, I have to halt and really check myself. And I need to take care of those basic needs. And sometimes I'm dehydrated.
Yeah.
I get a little cranky and it's like, oh, wait a minute, I haven't drank water yet today, So
Maybe
it's
she
just
do that.
really, checking yourself and taking care of that immediate need.
Beautiful. I love it. Okay, last question. You first of all, I've already said it, but you are a gift. And people needed every bit of the time that we spent together so that they can have that hope and that they can know that circumstances don't get to dictate our joy. We get to decide what that looks like. But by nature, our brains can really only hold on to one thing. So, what's the one thing that you want to leave the listeners with today that will help them carry forward something, whatever that something is?
That their story matters, that no matter what they've been through, their story matters. There's inspiration in them. If they're thinking about writing a book, write the book. Life is too short. If they're thinking about doing something, changing a career, change the career. Dive, make that leap of faith. And like I said, life is short and we got to do what fulfills us. And, I always say about hope, help one person every day. And I truly believe that, our inspirational stories, our testimonies are meant to give people hope. And so I just want to encourage your listening audience to really dive into what it is, about their story that could help someone else. Because I guarantee somebody listening has been through something someone else needs to hear right now.
Yeah, and we can't hide it. We can't pretend that we've got it all together because that just makes other people think they're supposed to too. And that's
That's
just
right.
not true. It's just not true. Tina, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing for students. Thank you for what you're doing for the community because you're doing that for those students, for their families, for the teachers in your building, for the community at large. Thank you. Thank you
Oh, thanks.
also for sharing your story on Productive Joy and giving us a little bit of hope that help one person every day. I know you did that today. So thanks.
Thank you.
And to all of our listeners, thank you. Today was not an April Fool's joke. Today was most definitely on point, and we all need a little more Tina Miller in our lives. So Tina Talks Truth, go find it and make some amazing things happen today, y'all. I'm going to leave you with this. Figure out a way today to turn fun into action.